this is the demo project that I used last class. And one of the things I really wanted to point out was how nicely everything here is labeled. We've got everything from these front hills all the way to the thing in the back, the sky, mountains, water. You name it, everything's labeled so that I know what's going on. When you bring a project into After Effects, make sure that your files are organized and labeled correctly. Another thing that you definitely want to do is make sure that you're working in RGB mode. If at any point you pull a file into After Effects and it won't come in as layers, it comes in as a flat file, and you're like, what the heck am I doing wrong? That is the thing that you're doing wrong. The image mode is under CMYK and not RGB. So you make it under RGB, bam, you're set to go. For anybody who's had me as a student before, I always say that whenever you're working digitally, work in RGB mode. And I've got other teachers that completely disagree with that, and that's fine. They can. But chances are your images are going to need to be worked with digitally, and if your stuff is in RGB mode the whole time you're working on it, you can switch it to CMYK later, but make sure that you're always working on an RGB. It'll make things easier in the long run. Great, we're going to open up After Effects now. The thing that I'm going to show you again today is relatively easy. It is a more complicated part of After Effects because we are dealing with three-dimensional elements. If anybody's used any kind of 3D program before, like Blender or Cinema 4D or things like that, you will see a couple of things that you had seen in those programs. This is a much more slimmed down and easy version of 3D graphics and 3D effects. So this should be, again, very easy. And when it comes to animating, the animating that we're going to be doing in this demo is very slim. There's not a lot of actual animation. As a matter of fact, we're only going to move one thing. We're going to make everything 3D, have everything set up, but the only thing that's actually animated is going to be the camera, and it's going to be the only thing that's keyframes and the only thing that's moving. Maybe I should have had this open before the demo, but we all make mistakes, and I'll just not make that again later, because After Effects apparently takes forever to open up. All right, so we've got this new composition, we've got a new project happening here. I'm going to, first of all, import my file. File import. I'll make sure that this is the right landscape layers because I have a work files folder on my desktop, my illustration motion class, and the parallaxing that I have hanging out in a raster. There it is. I'm making sure that I import as a composition, retain layer sizes. Click OK. Retain layer sizes. Awesome. And here's my file. I've got two things happening here. I've got my folder that has every single layer on it. And I also have this composition. Now I'm actually going to show you this a little bit more before we get into it. I'm going to push the tilde button, which looked like that. It's right by the escape button in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. Any window that you're in After Effects, like this one right here, if I push that, it'll make that window full screen. If I push it again, it'll bring it back to where I was. So if I wanted to just view the timeline and I push that button, full screen, full screen. I wanted to show you some things that they show here. The main things I wanted to show is that this shows you information about any of these files. So we know that when we started working with this file in Photoshop and we scanned it in, this was the resolution that they made the file. 3787 by 200. 2510. And then each of our layers has its own resolution too, because it's just looking at whatever that file is. That boat and these ducks are very small, smaller resolution. And our backgrounds are much bigger. All right, just wanted to let you know that this has this kind of information. And I'm going to open up the composition of my landscape that I have. My timeline has all the layers in order, with my top layer on top, my background layer in the back. But right now this composition is way too big. So when any of you bring in this file, it should be way too big because you're working with a file that we need to have printed. I'll be letting you know what the actual resolution to this file needs to be when pretty much at the end of this day, what I want your final file to be. But it's going to be too big for what we need to do. So this is a good opportunity to show you that you can go up to, when you have a composition that's not the right size, you can go to composition settings, and change a lot of things about your composition. First of all, and what we're going to do is we're going to change the width and the height. The width needs to be 1920 by 1080. This is full HD, full high definition. This is going to be shown possibly on a high definition TV. This is the proportions of it. Remember, I said it needed to be a 16 by 9 proportion. So there it is, hanging out right there. And that's great. When it comes to the frame rate, for this project, I would say you can just keep it at this 29.97. It'll look nice and smooth. It'll work out great. And when it comes to the duration, we're going to have this project be 15 seconds long. Easiest way to do that is to put a 15 and then a dot. That changes it from 15 frames to 15 seconds. We can also change your background color if we need to, but we don't need to. So what we did was we changed the size of our composition, but everything else inside of our composition stayed the same size. This is a little bit different than it is in Photoshop, and the same as it is in Illustrator, because again, vector-based program. This is great. This is exactly what we need. We're going to be changing the size of everything, but we're not going to be changing the size yet. What I want to talk about is turning things three-dimensionally. We want to make all of these layers 3D. And in order to do that, we're going to be looking, for example, these front hills right here. We're going to be looking at this 3D layer column. And all we need to do is click right there. And now this layer has become 3D. We're going to do that with all the layers, but really I don't want to confuse you yet. So I'm going to turn most of them off. I'm only going to mess with this sky layer right now. Do that. And I'm going to hide this little eyeball tool, all these other layers, just so you can see what's happening. So right now, this layer has become 3D. The biggest thing you'll notice when a layer becomes 3D is that the crosshair in the center of the item, it changes from just a regular crosshair to a crosshair that has arrows on it. There are 3 different color arrows, a red arrow, a green arrow, and a blue arrow. And when you hover over these arrows, they have different letters on them, X, Y, and Z. These are the different planes, X being left and right. So if I grab this X, I can move it left and right. The Y being up and down, and the Z being depth, so closer to us or farther away from us. That is a very common arrow thing to see in all 3D programs. So if this is your first foray into 3D, you'll just understand that those 3 arrows are what's going to be in every 3D program that you ever use. And they're going to be the same color too. Okay, so I've got this layer in 3D. Like I said, I want every layer to be in 3D. And in order to make things just a little bit easier to understand, we're going to create a camera so that you can see what this is actually looking like in 3D. So we've got all these. These are all 3D layers. And I'm going to go to Layer, New, Camera. When you open up a new camera for the first time, there are lots of different options. I don't want to scare you, so I'm not going to talk about any of them yet. Everything that's going on here, you can just keep as like, hey, this is all I want. You can name it if you want. I'm going to name this Andy Cam, because it's a great name. I'll click OK. And we're not going to see the camera yet in our composition, but it shows up right here. And it's automatically a 3D layer, so I don't have to, it doesn't even give me this option to change it. All right, so we've got a camera, and we've got all of these different layers. Now we're going to actually start looking at this in 3D. I'm going to give myself a little bit of room. This is the composition viewpoint, or view window. Some of you might have accidentally double-clicked any layer, and when you do, these footage layers pop up. If that ever happens, you can just close them. Your composition window is always hanging out here if you need to get back to it. But when you're in your composition window, there's all these really scary options that you see down here. Some of them we'll use, some of them we won't. What we're going to use right now is this one that says Active Camera. This lets you view the project from different kinds of cameras. Right now, the Active Camera, that's the one we've been using the whole time. It's got my Andy Cam in there, and if I click that, it'll look exactly the same because the Active Camera was in the exact same spot as this Andy Cam I made. But now we can look at this project from the top. If I click top, you'll see a flat line. You won't see the images anymore because we're seeing all of these layers in 3D. They're flat. And then we've got our camera right here that's looking at it over here. Camera looking at those layers. We can also go to something like Custom View 1. Custom View 1 might actually let you see this project in a way that is 3D. You can see the camera. You can see that it is viewing all of these flat layers. And when we look through that camera, this is what we see. Great. This is kind of exactly what we want. In order to work in 3D, however, I like to change right next to it. It says one view. I like to switch this to two views. And if you do it horizontal, those two views will be next to each other. Two views vertical, they'll be on top of each other. And you can change what these views are. This one's coming with Andy Cam. That's what I want my camera to see, so I can see what my video is going to look like. And this one, right now it says top, but I'm going to actually change this one. Now that I have it selected, I'm going to change it from top to this Custom View 1 so you can see what this looks like in space. Great. Now that I have these two views, I'm going to mess with this custom view, but I'm going to look at this one. Let's start with my sky. My sky is flat, very close to us. And as you can see, we're way too zoomed in on this project. What I want to do is I want to take the sky and I want to move this as far away from me as I can. I can do that a couple of ways. First of all, I can grab this Z arrow, and when I click it and I move it, you can actually see that I can move it closer to the camera or much farther away from the camera. If I hold the shift button, I'll be moving it a lot. So let's see if I can move it pretty far away. Excellent. I'll zoom out so you can see just how far away it is. That's way back in the background. If I turn off every other layer, you'll see that it's really far away, and we're seeing it, but we're seeing it's a little small. And I can always grab the corners, Did not grab the corner there. Did not grab the corner there. Did grab the corner there. And if I hold that shift button, I can keep the proportions and change the size to make sure that it fits in my view. I can start doing this with each of my layers. So my mountain layer, I want that to be pretty far back too. You can see I have some duplications happening, but that's okay for now. My water layer, I want to push back as well. The ducks, I think I'm going to keep these ducks exactly where they are. This boat layer, I'm also going to keep where it is. This tree layer, I'm actually going to move this one closer to us. The front hills, which is my closest layer, I'm going to make sure is in front of all of it. Now, most of it we can't see in our view, but you can see in this view, our custom view, that we have these all on different planes. I can switch this custom view to like a top view. You might be able to see things a little bit better, where here's my background, and here are all my different views here. I'm actually going to take all of these, select them all at once, and move them a little bit farther back, maybe together. You can see these. You can also move different parts of the images by clicking on opening up their position. Remember, the quick way to do that was the letter P. And to move them around left or right in this case, I don't want that. I want to move the z-axis farther away or closer to us. So you can also move them in the position. And I've got these all on different planes. Now that I have them in different planes, I can kind of see my whole view right here. This looks pretty nice, but now I actually want to start animating. And that's where the camera comes in. My Andy Cam. This is the only part of my composition that I want to animate. And all I really want to do is move this from like left to right. So let's look at my Andy Cam. If I hit the P button, you can see where the position is. If I look in my, let's see, instead of the top view, let's look at my custom view 1, so we can kind of see what this looks like at an angle. With my Andy Cam selected, I can zoom in and out. I can move it left and right. And you're starting to see that parallaxed effect happening in that image over there. So let me move it very far this way. And I'm going to create a keyframe. Now, at the end of the animation, I'm just going to put it at the 5-second mark for right now, even though we want this to be a 15-second animation to begin with. I'm going to move this the other direction. Holding the shift button while I do it lets me go a lot faster. I want it to go right here. So if we watch this animation, and I want to just have my work area be these first 5 seconds, so I can either move the work area head here, or I can just hit the N button. The N button will bring my work area to wherever my playhead is. I can now push the space bar right here and see that little animation moving. There are some things that are still not quite right about this. For example, I am you can definitely see how the things that are closer to us are moving a little bit faster than the stuff behind, where we're getting this great sense of depth because we are using an actual camera and sliding past this. But there's some parts of my animation where the illustration is cut off because I didn't draw things big enough. I can always change the size in After Effects, and I can always draw more on my layers, just kind of make your thing bigger. But this is as easy as it is to make a parallaxing animation. Especially one that's a little bit in 3D, and especially one where we're really kind of looking into this place and this space. A couple of the other things I want to show you. This was just a pan. All I did was move the camera from left to right. But I can also take this animation and zoom it a little bit more. So if I go to my keyframe, and this is this spot right here, very easy way to get to each of these keyframes. So I'm going to my second keyframe. I'm also going to have this zoomed in a bit. Maybe that's too much, but I really want you to see what this is looking like. Because this is all a position, it's going to start from far away and animate to zoom into this image. Zoom in and panning across. So again, we're getting that sense of space. And it's all coming from a bunch of flat illustrations. So this is what I meant when I said we were going to be animating today in 2.5D. Yes? So if you are having problems with it, it seems like you've got this ish. What's going on is, okay, this is actually great. Thank you. I'm going to show what's going on in here, just so everyone can see it. All right, so there was a complaint that when if you were trying to push that space bar and check that animation moving, that it wasn't able to be seen. So what looked like was happening, you've got two views up here. You've got your custom view 1 and your camera movement. If this is the window that's selected when you hit the space bar, you're not going to see anything happen. Because what's happening here is that the camera is moving, the camera's off screen so you can't see it, and you're not really seeing any animation happening. So if that ends up happening, I hope it's just going to stop that. Make sure that you have your viewport as the one that's selected when you hit that space bar, and you should be able to see that animation. Did that work? Was I right? Yes! I'm sorry, I just really like being able to help people with problems. So anytime you have any issues, just let me know. But this can get very confusing sometimes, having two things up here. I like having it up here just so I can see both things happening. Some of you may really like to have that one view and to just see it like this. And while you're scrolling, you can kind of see how that animation happens. One of the things I had mentioned at the beginning was I wanted this animation to be 15 seconds long. Well, when I started this animation, it was only 5 seconds long. And then I changed it to 15. Remember, I went up to composition settings, changed it to 15 seconds, which is great. However, all of my files stop at the 5-second mark, and you can kind of see it right down here. I want them all to be 15 seconds long. So, if I have a layer selected that's too short, I can either grab the end of it to change where it is, or I can start using the bracket buttons that are next to the letter P on your keyboard. And I want you to notice what happens. There's like an open bracket and an end bracket. If I hit the open bracket, wherever my timeline is, this bracket, you'll see it pop up on my screen, the beginning of the bracket goes right there, or the beginning of the time frame goes right there. If I do the end of it goes right there, okay? Or if I hold the shift button and click that bracket, nope, that was the wrong button. I did not mean shift. I meant alt? Yes. If I hold the alt button in that bracket, it will go all the way to wherever my timeline is, and the first part will stay where it is. and Alt and the open bracket will bring that here. So I can go to the end of my timeline to the 15-second mark. I can grab all of these from here to here, and I can do Alt bracket to get this to all be 15 seconds. And I can change this to go to the 15-second mark too. And I can see my animation. This may be a bit slow, but that's why you have to have your timeline at this 15 seconds so you can see it, so you can kind of change how much you want to zoom into it, how much you want to move it. Maybe you want to move it back and forth. Maybe you want to do a little bit more of a zoom. We don't need a lot of animation happening in this. We just need to make it seem like it's moving and that it's living. All right? And frankly, this is all you need to do. But at this point, you can start rotating things, messing with other stuff in 3D space. Once you really start seeing how things will work in 3D space, I'll show you here too. We'll go back to I'm going to stop this animation. We'll go back to 2 views. I could take any of these layers if I wanted to, and I could mess with their rotation. Like let's look at the boat. The boat's hanging out right there. We can kind of zoom into it a little bit. And we can see how to rotate it. R for rotate. And you'll see that when you open up rotate after a layer becomes 3D, instead of it just saying rotation, you have 4 different kinds of rotation. Either the orientation, which is the x-axis, the y-axis, and the z-axis, or they have each axis separately. But you can take any of these axes and rotate them. And it looks like it's just being squished, but if we look at this, you'll actually be able to see it kind of flipping and turning in space. And you can animate this if that's something you want to do. Maybe you want your buildings that you made to be on a slight angle. Well, let's see if I took these front hills and I did my little bit of a rotation, maybe on the Y. I wanted it to be tilted this way a little bit. That might be something that you want to do within your animation. You could try it out. You can play with it. But when it comes to this, I don't animate any of my layers. The only thing I'm animating in this case, oops, that's the wrong window. Zoom out a little bit. The only thing I'm animating is my camera. The camera is the only thing that's moving, and it gives this beautiful idea of space within a flat illustration. Hey, how's that seeming so far? Pretty okay? Pretty doable? Excellent. It's good because, again, this is, all of you should have at this point, your animation or your illustration in the rough sketch stage. So you'll at least be able to see how it's moving and see if you're on a good track for your finished illustration. This is where we can kind of see it, make changes to it, do whatever. What I want to have done is have you take your rough illustration, like I have here, turn it into these 3D layers and have it animated and parallaxing. So we're doing an animatic, kind of a rough sketch, even a video rough sketch, of what your final animation is going to look like. I would like this due next class. In order for it to be due next class, not only do you have to have the animation work in After Effects, but you're going to need to do 2 more things. You're going to need to render it out, and you're going to upload it to YouTube. So while I kind of reset my whole demo software right here, why don't you guys play with what you've got, continue working on your animation and whatnot. I'm going to do a quick reset to start a new demo, and I'm going to demo how to render your files. And after I show you how to render your files, I'm also going to show you how to upload them to YouTube.